Hey everybody, some gadget guy here with another device versus device, fight for blood! Of course, it is now time to compare the flagship Android phablet experience on the Galaxy Note 4 versus the Windows Phone experience found on the Lumia 1520. I, of course, am not a huge fan of just reading down the specs on the side of the box, so I trust that you will be able to look up the hardware differences between these two, but we are going to take a quick look at some of the usage between these two devices, ergonomics, fit, finish, build quality, and talk out some of the general differences I've had in hardware between these two phones. And of course, the most obvious feature to start this comparison off when we're talking about very large screened devices would be the very large screens. Nokia is employing a 1080p LCD panel with a 6-inch diagonal, while Samsung is employing a 5.7-inch screen with a resolution of 2560 by 1440, a Quad HD screen, or 2K screen, depending on who you ask. Now, I still don't feel that Quad HD on a screen size this size, even approaching a 6-inch display, is really a profound jump over 1080p. And this is an incredibly poor test because I'm shooting 1080p video, so you can't even see the resolution advantage in a 2560 by 1440 screen at this distance, but just kind of paging through these two devices, you really have to get into some nitty-gritty, some super fine detail before I can detect significant differences in clarity or resolution between these two phones. And especially when viewing these out at arm's length. One of the advantages of having a larger screen is being able to view it farther away from your face. You don't have to keep it right up against your nose. It boils down to one of those things for me where it makes you feel better knowing that there are more dots on the screen, but it's really up to software and apps to utilize those dots, and we have very little content that actually strikes at native res. But even throwing insanely high resolution photos onto my phones, and I'm still struggling to see significant difference. I can see some difference. For some reason, whenever I say this in one of my videos, I get a ton of comments from people, oh, well no, 2560 by 1440 is definitely better. There must be something wrong with you if you can't see the difference. I am telling you, I can see the difference. I'm just telling you, I can't see much of a difference. And even looking at similar web pages fully zoomed out on desktop view, I kind of feel Internet Explorer is actually doing a better job of maximizing space than mobile Chrome. I'm gonna catch a lot of flack for that too. And I'm not suggesting that Internet Explorer is a better browser than Chrome, but I'm just saying that with the Android UI elements that we have to work with our notification bar at the top, the larger URL bar here at the top of the browser, we're already sort of losing a little bit of that resolution advantage. And when I'm looking at similar elements between the two at similar rates of zoom, I can't see that one is really much easier than the other to read. I mean, if I can detect subtle clarity here in like maybe some of these little graph elements or the key stats from the last 30 days, subscribers net change, I mean, like, I can definitely give just a little bit of a nod to the Galaxy Note 4, but when we're dealing with screens, I am a sucker for an AMOLED display, and that is one area where I do appreciate the color, the saturation, and the contrast ratio that comes off of the Galaxy Note 4. Although for an LCD screen, Nokia did a really good job with the 1520 in trying to get their pure black contrast ratio to at least somewhat resemble what we can get off of an AMOLED display. And I wish it were easier for me to demonstrate, but both of these screens have insane high contrast, high brightness modes that whenever they detect direct sunlight will actually shift the colors in the display, so it'll do a better job of compensating for what actually washes out a screen when you hit direct sunlight. And of course, for both of these phones, whenever you're using that super bright mode, it's going to kill your battery. And speaking of that battery life, I actually still have had better experiences with Nokia on the 1520 and getting me to run through the day, through the night, and maybe into part of the next day, even with moderate use. I've got to throw a nod to Samsung though, as while the Note is not the battery champ that it used to be, we're just used to a number of phones that now pack super large batteries into them, so the Note's not really special there anymore. That running with power saver on, I don't have the same issues that I did with the Galaxy S5. I don't know if my Galaxy S5 was just having issues, but turning power saver on the Galaxy S absolutely wrecked performance. Whereas restricting performance here on the Galaxy Note 4, I'm actually getting reasonable usage. Gets a little laggy, gets a little stuttery, especially with all the extra crap that they pack into TouchWiz. But for the most part, it's still a usable phone, whereas my Galaxy S5 was not. Though it really does showcase that I do think that Windows Phone is a slightly more power-efficient operating system. If you folks have followed my channel at all, you would know that I am a smartphone camera snob. And over the last couple of years, I really do think that Nokia has taken dominance over the smartphone photography landscape. But recently, Samsung has stepped up to providing us larger image sensors. On the Galaxy S5 in the Alpha, they've produced their own ISO sensor, which is a larger image sensor, but on the Note 4, they're using a larger Sony sensor just so that they could also include optical image stabilization. And now that brings Samsung very close to the performance that we see out of the PureView sensor on Lumia phones. It's now extremely difficult for me to say that there's any one clear winner, and this is the most fun I've had shooting photos and videos on an Android device since I've started reviewing gadgets. It's that good. At the time this video was shot, we've still yet to see the Lumia denim update, so I do have to give a subtle nod to the Note 4 for video in that it can shoot 2560 by 1440 and UHD video, proper 4K resolution, whereas the Lumia 1520 is still stuck at 1080p. Though we should see that Lumia update soon, which should unroll UHD video at 24 frames per second. And when that happens, I'll have to do another camera test with both of these phones just to see which one I prefer. Though in terms of camera apps, I still prefer the Lumia camera app, even though I know it's going to be changed significantly when the Lumia denim update hits. But I just find this layout of being able to slide very quickly through all of the various photographic settings is definitely a bit nicer, and it's faster to use for those of us who like to dig into these composition style settings. Whereas on the Note 4, it's a two-step process to get into some of the more exacting controls for white balance, ISO exposure, and while we can change some of these things here on the left-hand side, we just don't have the ease of use that we do in being able to flick these settings on and off that we find on the Lumia camera app. So for the software side of this, I still have to give the nod to the Lumia, and I do think that this is a little bit easier to use for crafting high quality still photos. And then just to throw another wrench into this comparison, for the audio on your videos, the quad microphone array found on the 1520 is far superior to anything that Samsung has used on any of their phones. It does an amazing job of audio focusing so that it will try and draw audio directly from the subject that your camera is focused on. It has phenomenal noise reduction capabilities, and then you can switch it over into a full surround sound as well. So depending on what you're trying to shoot, for example, if you're trying to shoot concert footage, the audio on this thing is insane. Now, while Samsung has gotten much better about improving the audio on their videos, they still are probably a whole generation behind what Nokia has been able to do on their Lumia series. And that audio comparison continues on to the speakers built into this phone as well. I think the speaker playback on the 1520 is a slightly higher quality than what we get on the Galaxy Note 4. It's a little less prone to distortion, but the speaker on the Note 4 is honking loud. I think this is the loudest smartphone that we've tested here on Some Gadget Guy, and I do have speaker reviews for both so that you can listen to the subtle differences that you will find between these two phones. And I yearn for the day that someone will just remove the earpiece speaker and replace that with the rear firing speaker and only have one speaker firing in the correct direction, namely at your face. And I think Nokia runs away with a subtle audio advantage when you compare playback over the headphone jacks on both of these phones. Again, with every successive Samsung generation, I'm happy to see improvements to things like headphone jack playback. There's just something really wonderful about the flat, even, precise, the accurate playback that I hear on Nokia devices, and then the wonderful EQ that you can jump into on a Nokia to really tweak and tailor your listening experience. But where there's just really no competition between these two phones are in the bleeding edge tech that you can find on the Note 4. Now, this really shouldn't come as much of a surprise because this is almost a whole year newer than the 1520. But Android support for things like IR blasters on the top of our phones, fingerprint scanners, the incredible work that Samsung has done with their inductive stylus for fine point control. I really do think that it speaks to the culture of what both of these companies were trying to accomplish when they went out to make larger screened phones. In my opinion, Nokia was really looking at how you could replace a mini tablet. And their mission was largely successful, as when I'm at home, I am far more likely to pick up the 1520, this phone, than any mini tablet Nexus 7 Kindle that we also have in-house. However, Samsung, I really feel, was looking at an uncompromising mobile phone experience. So even though this is still a really big device, no one would ever say that a Note is a small phone. It just fits into my lifestyle a little bit better than the 1520 does when I have to go from pocket to car to office to home. I feel a little bit better taking this out into the field with me and actually using it. And as large screen devices sort of require me to use both hands to operate them, I at least get some cool little perks for having to use both hands. In terms of build, fit, and finish, both of these devices give off wonderful impressions. I've been a long time fan of this matte finish, this polycarb shell that Nokia has been using for many of their phones. But Samsung has finally stepped up into a more premium feel, especially for these metal edges that run along the sides of the phone. Now, how these two devices age over time, I've already had pretty good experiences with the Lumia 1520. You guys have seen me show off the gouges and the nicks and the scratches that I've gotten on my 1520 and how they actually blend into the casing a little bit better. This isn't paint, this is the actual color of the plastic, so when it does get scratched, those scratches kind of disappear into the rest of the plastic. And while we're using this sort of fake leather on the back, which is also textured, so this should also do a really good job of hiding scratches, I'm not entirely sure how this metal edge will wear over time. Now we can see there's a silvery bezel which runs on this edge, So this is some type of finish or paint that runs along the flat surface, and that means that it'll probably get nicked up or scratched over time. I don't think it's gonna retain this gray color for very long. Now between these two, I really think the Note is the more portable phone. The slightly smaller screen, the more rounded off corners. I love these little dimples that they inherited from the Galaxy S5 Active and the Galaxy Alpha, and it just feels a little bit better in the hand, especially when trying to use it one-handed, which is always going to be difficult on phones this large, but there are times you just can't dedicate both hands to using your phone, and these rounded corners and edges, while a little bit sharper than, say, the Galaxy S5 Active, are a lot nicer to hold than the pointy edges that you find on the 1520. So folks, these videos are never meant for me to say that there is some clear purchasing decision that you should buy one or the other. But as large phones are really popular right now, I do think that this is a fascinating examination in where two companies can go in very different directions for producing a phablet. And of course, I always want to hear from you folks. When you're shopping a large screen device, what is it that draws you to that experience? Are you looking more at, say, replacing a mini tablet so that you don't have to carry multiple devices? Or are you looking at expanding the role of your phone into an uncompromising productivity device? Definitely drop me some comments down below, because those are the conversations that I love to get into. As always, folks, thanks so much for watching my videos, subscribing to this channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can see more of these types of comparisons and reviews. I, of course, would not be able to continue producing videos like this if you folks weren't out there sharing my videos with family, friends, and on social media, so I can't thank you enough for bringing more people to the party. Hit that thumbs up button, and I will catch you all on the next review.